April 4th, 1944, Kohima, Assam Province, Northeast India. Lieutenant Colonel John Laverty stands on Garrison Hill, looking east toward the jungle-covered mountains of Burma. Somewhere out there, moving through that green hell, is the Japanese 31st Division. 15,000 men, battle-hardened, veterans of Malaya, Singapore, Burma. They have marched 300 miles through mountains and jungle to reach this place. They are coming for Kohima. Laverty commands the Assam Regiment, a battalion of mostly Nepalese and Indian soldiers. Around him, spread across a ridgeline barely a mile long, are elements of the 4th Battalion, Queen's Royal Regiment, the Assam Rifles, the Burma Regiment, convalescent soldiers from the nearby military hospital pressed into service. Even non-combatant personnel handed rifles and assigned firing positions. Total strength, approximately 1,500 men. Against 15,000, the math is not favorable. Kohima is not a fortress. It is a hill station, a colonial administrative center perched at 7,000 feet elevation where British officials escaped the heat of the Indian plains. There is a district commissioner's bungalow, a tennis court, a club, neat roads lined with trees. It was never meant to be defended. There are no prepared fortifications, no bunkers, no proper trench systems, just a ridge, and the men who occupy it. The garrison has been reinforcing positions for 3 days since intelligence confirmed the Japanese advance. Trenches have been dug, barbed wire strung, firing positions prepared, supply dumps organized, but everyone knows the preparations are inadequate. This position should be held by a division, 10,000 men or more. Instead, it will be defended by a reinforced battalion because there is no alternative. Kohima sits on the only road connecting the Assam Plains to the forward British positions at Imphal, 60 miles south. That road, a single-lane track carved into mountainsides, switchbacking through jungle and over ridges, is the lifeline for 30,000 British and Indian troops at Imphal. If the Japanese take Kohima, they cut that road. The Imphal garrison is surrounded, cut off, doomed, and if Imphal falls, all of Assam lies open. The supply route to nationalist China through the Himalayas, the only way to keep China in the war against Japan, is severed. The eastern frontier of India collapses. The strategic stakes are absolute. Kohima must hold. Laverty knows this. Every man in the garrison knows this. They also know they are grotesquely outnumbered, undersupplied, and occupying an indefensible position. But orders are orders. Hold Kohima. Deny the Japanese the road. Buy time for reinforcements to arrive. How much time? Nobody knows. Days, maybe a week. The 2nd British Division is moving up from the plains, but they are still 70 miles away, fighting through Japanese roadblocks on the single mountain road. The relief force is coming. Eventually, the garrison just has to survive until then. April 4th, evening, the first Japanese patrols probe the perimeter. Not attacks, reconnaissance. Feeling out the defenses, identifying positions, preparing for the assault to come. Shots are exchanged. The Japanese withdraw into the jungle. The siege of Kohima begins not with a dramatic assault, but with this quiet probing. Professional, methodical. The Japanese know they have time. They have surrounded the position. The garrison is trapped on its ridge, hemmed in by jungle-covered slopes on all sides. There is no escape, no reinforcement, just the slow tightening of the noose. That night, the garrison listens to the sounds of the Japanese digging in, the clink of entrenching tools, the snap of branches being cut for camouflage, the murmur of voices in a language most defenders do not understand. The enemy is close, unnervingly close. On Garrison Hill, sentries peer into the darkness, seeing nothing but knowing the Japanese are there. Meters away, maybe less. The jungle presses in from all sides, a living presence, concealing an army. April 5th, dawn. The bombardment begins. Japanese mountain guns, 75mm howitzers, disassembled and carried through the jungle by pack animals and human porters, then reassembled in hidden positions, open fire. Shells scream in and detonate across the ridge. High explosive. The earth erupts. Trees shatter. Men die. The shelling is not constant. The Japanese cannot afford to waste ammunition in a campaign with no supply line, but it is accurate. Forward observers hidden in the jungle direct fire onto specific positions. The district commissioner's bungalow takes multiple hits. The hospital is shelled. Supply dumps are targeted. Then the mortars join in. Lighter, more mobile, positioned closer to the perimeter. The distinctive cough of mortar tubes launching. The whistle of shells arcing overhead. The crump of detonations. Smaller than artillery, but more numerous, more persistent. Under this fire, the Japanese infantry advance. They do not charge in massed waves. Japanese tactics in jungle warfare are sophisticated. infiltration, encirclement, close combat. Small groups move through the undergrowth, probing for weak points, seeking to penetrate the perimeter. Establish positions inside the defensive line. Create chaos. The fighting is immediate, intimate, brutal. Defenders in forward trenches see movement in the jungle. They fire. Sometimes they hit targets. Sometimes the jungle swallows the bullets and reveals nothing. Japanese soldiers reach the wire. Bangalore torpedoes, explosive charges on poles, blow gaps. Infantry rush through. They are met with rifle fire, grenades, desperate hand-to-hand fighting. The perimeter holds, barely. This pattern will repeat. Bombardment, infantry assault, close combat, repulse, then silence, while the Japanese regroup and the garrison counts casualties and redistributes ammunition and waits for the next attack. April 5th costs the garrison 30 dead, twice that wounded, 30 men out of 1,500, 2% casualties in a single day. At that rate, the garrison has less than 2 weeks before it ceases to exist as a fighting force. The defenders settle in for a siege. Rations are calculated. Water is rationed. The garrison's water supply depends on a single point in no man's land, accessible only at night under fire. Ammunition is inventoried. Medical supplies assessed. Everything is inadequate, but the line holds. The Japanese have not broken through. The road behind Kohima remains in British hands. The strategic objective, denying the Japanese the road, is achieved. For now. Laverty looks at the positions, the exhausted men, the mounting wounded in the aid station. He does the math. Days, maybe a week. The relief force is coming. It has to come. On the perimeter, soldiers dig their trenches deeper, string more wire, prepare for the next assault. They are outnumbered 10-1. They occupy an indefensible ridge with inadequate supplies and no hope of reinforcement. They are going to hold anyway because there is no alternative. The siege of Kohima has begun. To understand why 15,000 Japanese soldiers are fighting through jungle mountains to reach a small hill station in Assam, you need to understand what desperation looks like at the strategic level. March 1944. Japan is losing the war. Not obviously. Not yet. But the trajectory is clear to anyone studying the maps. Guadalcanal, lost. The Central Pacific. American island-hopping advances steadily westward. The Marianas will fall soon, bringing Japan itself within range of American bombers. Chinese resistance continues, tying down Japanese armies that are needed elsewhere. And in Burma, the British are no longer retreating. For 3 years, the Japanese have pushed the British out of Burma, out of Malaya, out of Singapore. The myth of Western invincibility in Asia has been shattered, but the advance has stalled. The British hold Assam. They hold the mountain frontier. And from Assam, supplies flow over the Himalayas to nationalist China, keeping the Chinese war effort alive, preventing Japan from consolidating its conquests. Lieutenant General Renya Mutaguchi, commanding the Japanese 15th Army in Burma, proposes a solution. Operation U-Go, an offensive into India. Objectives: destroy British forces at Imphal, capture the supply bases at Imphal and Kohima. Cut the road to China and, most ambitiously, trigger an uprising among India's population against British colonial rule. Take Imphal and Kohima, the plan suggests, and India might rise in rebellion. The British Raj, already weakened by nationalist movements, could collapse. Japan would control all of South and Southeast Asia. The war in the Pacific becomes unwinnable for the Americans if India falls. It is an audacious plan, also a desperate one. The Japanese logistical situation is catastrophic. There is no supply line capable of supporting a major offensive through the Burma Mountains. The roads, such as they exist, are single-track jungle. Paths, impassable during monsoon, barely navigable in dry season. There is no rail connection, no port facilities. Supplies must be carried by porters, pack animals, and human backs through 300 miles of mountain jungle. Mutaguchi's solution: live off captured British supplies. The offensive will carry minimal rations, 3 weeks' worth. After that, the army will eat what it captures from the British. The plan requires reaching Imphal quickly, overwhelming the defenders before they can destroy their supply dumps, and using British food and ammunition to sustain the offensive. It is gambling everything on speed and shock. If the advance stalls, if the British hold longer than expected, if the supply dumps are denied, the Japanese army starves in the mountains. The plan is opposed by nearly every senior Japanese officer who examines it. The logistical concerns are insurmountable. The assumption that British supplies can be captured intact is wildly optimistic. The terrain is impossible for conventional military operations. Mutaguchi overrules all objections. He has political support in Tokyo. The offensive is approved. 3 divisions will advance: the 15th Division toward Imphal from the east, the 33rd Division toward Imphal from the south, and the 31st Division, 15,000 men under Lieutenant General Kotoku Sato, toward Kohima in the north. The 31st Division's mission: take Kohima, cut the Imphal road, prevent British reinforcements from reaching Imphal, then turn south to complete the encirclement. Kohima is a secondary objective. The main prize is Imphal, but Kohima is the key. Control Kohima, and Imphal is isolated. Lose Kohima, and the entire offensive unravels. March 15, 1944. The offensive begins. Japanese forces cross the Chindwin River, the border between Japanese-occupied Burma and British-held India, and plunge into the mountain jungle. The advance is punishing. The terrain is vertical, ridges rising thousands of feet, valleys plunging just as deep. The jungle is impenetrable. Trails must be cut. Artillery must be disassembled and carried piece by piece. Mules and oxen haul supplies until they collapse from exhaustion, then are slaughtered and eaten. The soldiers advance through landscapes that defy military logistics. Rivers must be forded. Cliffs must be climbed. Jungle must be hacked through machete by machete. There are no villages, no infrastructure. Nothing but green hell extending in every direction, and yet they advance. The Japanese soldier in 1944 is among the most formidable infantry in the world. Disciplined, tough, conditioned to endure hardships that would break other armies. They carry minimal equipment: rifle, ammunition, basic rations. They march faster and farther than their opponents believe possible. They infiltrate through terrain thought impassable. They attack where defense is weakest, retreat into jungle where pursuit is impossible. For 3 weeks, the 31st Division advances through the mountains. They bypass British outposts. They infiltrate past defensive positions. They move faster than British intelligence predicts. Reconnaissance aircraft spot them, but the jungle canopy conceals their true strength and direction. By late March, advance elements of the 31st Division reach the hills around Kohima. The British are caught between competing demands. At Imphal, 60 miles south, the main Japanese offensive is developing. The garrison there is already surrounded, fighting for survival. Reinforcements are desperately needed. The 5th Indian Division is being airlifted into Imphal, the largest air supply operation attempted to that point in the war. Kohima, by comparison, seems less critical. It is a supply depot, an administrative center. The assumption is that Japanese forces advancing toward Kohima are a diversion, a screening force, not a main attack. This assumption is wrong. By April 3rd, it becomes clear that a full Japanese division is converging on Kohima. The garrison, originally just a small administrative and supply detachment, is hastily reinforced with whatever troops can be scraped together. The 4th Battalion, Queen's Royal Regiment, marching north to reinforce Imphal, is diverted to Kohima. Convalescent soldiers from the hospital are issued weapons. Non-combatants are armed and assigned to defensive positions. The result: 1,500 men occupying a position designed for maybe a battalion. Facing a division, the British command understands the strategic mathematics. Kohima must hold. If the Japanese take the ridge, they control the road. If they control the road, Imphal is doomed. If Imphal falls, all of Assam is threatened. Orders go out: hold Kohima at all costs. No one specifies what all costs means, but the garrison is about to find out. April 4th, the Japanese 31st Division closes in on Kohima from 3 directions. General Sato establishes his headquarters in the hills overlooking the ridge. His artillery is positioned. His infantry battalions deploy into assault positions. Reconnaissance confirms British strength: minimal. The position looks vulnerable. Sato's orders from Mutaguchi are explicit: take Kohima quickly, cut the road, prevent reinforcements from reaching Imphal. Speed is essential. Every day the garrison holds is a day the British have to organize relief forces. Sato plans a methodical assault: artillery preparation, infantry infiltration, encirclement, annihilation. Textbook. The British garrison, outnumbered and undersupplied, should collapse within days, but Sato faces his own problems. His supply situation is already critical. The division advanced 300 miles in 3 weeks. Rations are running low. Ammunition is limited. Medical supplies are inadequate. Resupply is dependent on porters carrying loads back through the mountains, an impossibly slow process. The division is supposed to capture British supplies. That is the plan. Take Kohima, seize the supply dumps, sustain the offensive with captured material. The plan requires winning quickly. Both sides understand this. The Japanese must take Kohima fast before their supplies run out. The British must hold Kohima long enough for relief forces to arrive. It becomes a race. Japanese logistics versus British endurance. Whoever outlasts the other wins. The siege begins with both sides aware of the stakes. The Japanese advance with the confidence of an army that has conquered half of Asia. The British garrison digs in with the desperation of men who know they are the last obstacle between the enemy and catastrophe. Kohima is not about tactics or brilliance or clever maneuvering. It is about will. Which side can endure longer? The Japanese have numbers, momentum, and experience. The British have a ridge, inadequate supplies, and no choice but to hold. On April 5th, the Japanese assault begins in earnest. Artillery shells scream in. Infantry advance through the jungle. The battle for Kohima, a battle that will decide the fate of the Burma Campaign, starts with explosions and gunfire, and men dying on a ridge nobody outside the British Indian Army had ever heard of. April 6, 1944. The perimeter is shrinking, not in kilometers, in meters. The Japanese are not breaking through in massed assaults, they are infiltrating. Snipers in threes. Machine gun teams dug into positions 50 yards from British trenches. Mortar teams that fire a few rounds, then displace before counter-battery fire can locate them. The siege is becoming an intimate horror. The garrison's defensive line runs along a ridgeline barely 900 yards long and 300 yards wide at its widest point. That is the entire battlefield. Garrison Hill at the northern end. The district commissioner's bungalow and tennis court in the center. The supply depot and hospital at the southern end. Everything squeezed onto a ridge surrounded by jungle-covered slopes that rise and fall at brutal angles. There is no rear area. There is no safe zone. Every position is within range of Japanese weapons. The district commissioner's tennis court becomes the focal point. It sits on a relatively flat terrace between Garrison Hill to the north and the supply area to the south. In peacetime, British officials played tennis here, surrounded by manicured lawns and flower gardens. Now it is a killing ground. The British hold trenches on the western edge of the court. The Japanese hold trenches on the eastern edge. The distance between the opposing lines, 40 yards, the width of a tennis court. At night, soldiers hear the enemy breathing, coughing, whispering. The proximity is psychologically devastating. There is no distance, no abstraction. The enemy is right there, close enough to hear, to smell, to touch if you were insane enough to climb out of the trench. Both sides throw grenades across the court. The projectiles arc through darkness, detonating in opposing trenches. Sometimes British grenades fall short and explode in no man's land. Sometimes Japanese grenades overshoot and land in their own positions. The tennis court is cratered with explosions, littered with equipment, bodies, debris. During daylight, movement above trench level means death. Japanese snipers watch every inch of ground. They are patient, professional. A British soldier who raises his head for a 3-second look gets a bullet. Multiple defenders learn this lesson the fatal way. Private Arthur Swinson of the Royal West Kents keeps a diary. His entry for April 7th. We are living like rats in holes. The Japs are so close we can hear them talking. They tried to rush us last night. We stopped them with grenades and bayonets. 5 of our lads dead. Don't know how many Japs. Too close to count. The fighting descends into brutality that defies conventional military terminology. This is not maneuver warfare. This is trench combat from the First World War, compressed into a space the size of a few city blocks. The Japanese excel at this. Their infantry tactics emphasize close combat, infiltration, night attacks. They probe constantly, searching for weak points, trying to penetrate the line. April 8th. A Japanese patrol infiltrates to within 10 yards of the district commissioner's bungalow before being detected. The alarm goes up. Defenders rush from positions to confront infiltrators already inside the perimeter, fighting in darkness. Muzzle flashes. Screaming, bayonets, a sergeant from the Assam. Regiment kills 3 Japanese soldiers with his kukri, the traditional Nepalese curved blade, before being shot. The infiltrators are killed or driven back. But the message is clear. The perimeter is porous. The Japanese can penetrate whenever they mass sufficient force at a single point. Levity reorganizes the defenses. Positions are consolidated. The perimeter contracts further. Outlying positions are abandoned, their defenders pulled back to the main line. The garrison is trading space for survivability, giving up ground to maintain a continuous defensive line. But there is not much ground to give. The water situation becomes critical. The garrison's only water source is a spring on the slope below Garrison Hill, now in no man's land. Accessing it requires leaving the trenches, climbing down the slope under cover of darkness, filling containers, climbing back up, all while Japanese positions overlook the area. Water parties go out every night. Not volunteers, assigned duty. Men draw straws. The unlucky ones crawl down the slope with containers, moving in absolute silence, knowing that a single sound means machine gun fire from multiple directions. Some parties make it back. Some do not. By April 9th, water rationing is severe. 1 water bottle per man per day. That water must serve for drinking, cooking, washing wounds, everything. In the heat and stress of combat, it is nowhere near enough. Men develop cracked lips, headaches, disorientation from dehydration. Ammunition is rationed. Riflemen are limited to 10 rounds per hour unless under direct attack. Machine gunners fire in short, controlled bursts to conserve ammunition. Grenades are reserved for emergencies. The wounded pile up in the aid station, a bunker dug into the hillside, covered with timber and sandbags, lit by kerosene lamps. The medical staff works in conditions beyond description. Supplies are running low. Morphine is almost gone. Bandages are washed and reused. Surgical instruments are sterilized over open flames. Major John Nettlefield, the garrison's medical officer, operates in shifts that blur into continuous labor. Shrapnel wounds, bullet wounds, burns from phosphorus grenades, traumatic amputations. The injuries are catastrophic, and the capacity to treat them is minimal. Men die on the operating table, not from their wounds, but from shock and dehydration and sheer exhaustion. Bodies are buried in shallow graves outside the aid station. There is no time for proper funerals, no space for marked graves. The dead are wrapped in blankets, placed in holes covered with dirt. The living envy them dos. April 10th, Japanese pressure intensifies. Artillery fire increases, not in volume, but in accuracy. Forward observers have identified every key position. Shells land on command posts, supply dumps, the aid station. The bombardments are brief but devastating. Then the infantry attacks come. Not massive banzai charges. The Japanese in Burma have learned that such tactics produce casualties without results. Instead, coordinated assaults on multiple points simultaneously, forcing the defenders to divide their already inadequate forces. An attack hits the northern perimeter at dawn. Japanese soldiers emerge from the jungle 30 yards from the trenches, covered by machine gun fire and mortars. They rush the wire, blow gaps with Bangalore torpedoes, pour through. Hand-to-hand combat erupts. Rifles are useless at these ranges, too slow, too cumbersome. It comes down to bayonets, entrenching tools, fists, anything. A lance corporal from the Royal West Kents kills 4 Japanese soldiers with his bayonet before being shot in the chest. He survives. The bullet lodges in his rib cage, missing vital organs. He refuses evacuation, continues fighting with his wound wrapped in a field dressing. The attack is repulsed. The Japanese withdraw, leaving bodies in the wire. An hour later, another attack hits the southern perimeter. Same tactics, same results. Repulsed, but at cost. The garrison loses 12 men killed, 23 wounded. 12 more soldiers subtracted from the defensive strength. 23 more casualties in an aid station already overwhelmed. The math is grinding towards zero. Laverty calculates the attrition rate. At current casualty levels, the garrison has perhaps 4 more days of combat effectiveness. After that, the defensive line becomes untenable. Not enough men to hold the positions. Not enough strength to repel attacks. 4 days. The relief column is still 50 miles away, fighting through Japanese roadblocks on the mountain road. 4 days might as well be forever. That night, the Japanese launch a night attack on Garrison Hill. They advance under cover of darkness, infiltrating close before the alarm is raised. Fighting erupts across the hilltop. Grenades, bayonets, chaos in pitch darkness. A platoon of Assam Regiment soldiers holds a bunker at the summit. Japanese infantry swarm the position. The defenders fight from inside the bunker, firing through loopholes, throwing grenades out the entrance. The Japanese throw grenades in. Explosions in confined spaces. Men screaming. The bunker holds. The Japanese withdraw at dawn. Daylight reveals the cost. Japanese bodies lie within meters of the bunker entrance. British and Indian soldiers lie in the trenches. The tennis court is pockmarked with fresh shell craters. Garrison Hill still stands. The tennis court still divides the armies. The perimeter still holds, but it is shrinking, contracting, being compressed by relentless pressure into a space so small that survival seems geometrically impossible. In the trenches, exhausted soldiers stare across 40 yards at an enemy they can hear but rarely see. They know the Japanese are there, waiting, probing, preparing the next assault. The siege continues. The perimeter shrinks. The mathematics of attrition grind toward their inevitable conclusion, unless the relief arrives. April 11th, 1944. The garrison is dying. Not metaphorically, literally. The defensive perimeter has contracted to less than 300 yards in diameter. 700 men remain combat effective out of the original 1,500. The rest are dead, wounded, or too exhausted to fight. The aid station holds over 200 casualties in a space designed for 30. Water is nearly gone. Ammunition stocks are critical. Rations have been cut to 1 meal per day, bully beef and hard biscuits when available. The smell is overwhelming. Unburied bodies decomposing in the tropical heat. Latrines overflowing because men cannot leave positions to dig new ones. Unwashed soldiers who have not removed their uniforms in a week. Gangrene setting in among the wounded. The stench of death and decay permeates everything. And still, the Japanese attack. April 12th. A sustained bombardment begins at dawn. Artillery and mortars pound the contracted perimeter for 2 hours. Shells fall on positions already shattered by previous bombardments. Trenches collapse. Bunkers cave in. Men are buried alive in their fighting positions. Then, the assault. Japanese infantry advance from 3 directions simultaneously, converging on the center of the perimeter. The defenders, spread impossibly thin, fight from positions that barely qualify as defensive works anymore. Shell craters, collapsed trenches, piles of rubble. The Japanese reach the district commissioner's bungalow. The building has been hit so many times, it is barely recognizable as a structure. Walls blown out, roof collapsed, interior gutted by fire. British soldiers hold the ruins. Japanese soldiers assault from the east. The fighting is room to room. Corner to corner, a section of Royal West Kents defends the basement. Japanese soldiers throw grenades down the stairs. The defenders throw them back before they explode. A grenade lands, a soldier grabs it, throws it back up the stairs. It detonates at the top, killing the Japanese soldiers waiting there. This exchange repeats. Grenades down, grenades back up, explosions, screaming. The defenders hold the basement by the narrowest margin, reaction time measured in fractions of a second. Above them, the tennis court has become unrecognizable. The neat grass surface is cratered and scorched. Bodies lie in no man's land, impossible to retrieve. British and Japanese trenches on opposite sides are separated now by less than 30 yards, close enough to throw stones, close enough to hear every word. At night, Japanese soldiers call out in English. Psychological warfare. British soldiers, you are surrounded. You have no food nor water. Surrender, and you will be treated well. Keep fighting, and you will die. Some defenders shout back. Profanity mostly. Defiance. Others stay silent, conserving energy. Knowing that engaging in shouting matches wastes calories they cannot afford to burn. The strain is breaking men in ways that have nothing to do with enemy action. Sleep deprivation. Days without more than a few minutes of unconsciousness. Stress. Constant alertness, knowing that any moment could bring an attack. Dehydration. Men hallucinating from lack of water, seeing things that are not there, hearing voices. On April 13th, a sergeant is found in his trench, staring at nothing, unresponsive. He has not been wounded. He has simply shut down. Combat fatigue, what later wars will call post-traumatic stress. His mind has reached its limit and stopped functioning. He is evacuated to the aid station, where he sits motionless, eyes open, seeing nothing. He is not the only one. The psychological casualties are mounting as fast as the physical ones. Lavity assesses the situation. Water will run out completely within 24 hours. Ammunition is sufficient for perhaps 2 more days of sustained combat. The wounded now outnumber the effective defenders. The perimeter cannot contract further without abandoning critical positions. The breaking point has arrived. He drafts a message to headquarters. The garrison cannot hold beyond April 15th. Relief must arrive by then, or the position will be lost. The message is transmitted by radio, one of the few pieces of equipment still functioning. The reply comes back within hours. The relief column, 2nd British Division, is fighting its way up the road. They are now 30 miles away. They are encountering heavy resistance at every turn. Japanese roadblocks, demolished bridges, mined switchbacks. The advance is slow. Can the garrison hold for 3 more days? Lavity does not respond immediately. He walks the perimeter, such as it is. He sees men so exhausted they can barely stand. He sees wounded lying in trenches because the aid station has no more room. He sees ammunition stocks that might last 48 hours with strict rationing. 3 more days seems impossible. He transmits, "Will hold." There is no discussion, no debate. The order is to hold, so they will hold until relief arrives or until the garrison is annihilated. Those are the only options. April 14th. The water runs out. Not completely. There are a few containers left, reserved for the wounded. But the combat troops have nothing. Men lick dew off leaves. They catch rainwater in helmets during a brief afternoon shower. They drink from puddles contaminated with blood and decomposition. Dehydration accelerates the collapse. Men become sluggish, disoriented. Reaction times slow. Marksmanship degrades. The defenders are operating on the edge of physiological failure, and the Japanese, sensing weakness, increase pressure. An attack hits the southern perimeter at 3 p.m., infantry supported by concentrated mortar fire. The defenders, dehydrated and exhausted, fight from instinct and training rather than conscious thought. They fire their rifles, throw grenades, stab with bayonets when the enemy reaches the trenches. The attack is repulsed. Cost: 8 dead, 15 wounded. The garrison now has fewer than 600 combat-effective soldiers. That night, Levity gathers his officers, 5 men, representing what remains of the command structure. They meet in a bunker lit by a single candle. The discussion is brief. Ammunition status: critical. Water status: exhausted. Food status: minimal. Medical status: catastrophic. Defensive perimeter: untenable. Can we hold until relief arrives? Nobody answers immediately, because the honest answer is no. The garrison is at breaking point. One more major attack, one more day without water, one more night without sleep, and the line will collapse not from enemy action, but from sheer human inability to continue. But Levity does not ask for honest assessments. He asks, will we hold? And the answer, from every officer present, yes, not because they believe it, but because there is no alternative. The strategic mathematics remain unchanged. Kohima must hold. If the garrison breaks, the road is lost. If the road is lost, Imphal is lost. If Imphal is lost, the entire campaign collapses, so they will hold. Because the alternative is unacceptable. April 15th, dawn. The Japanese launch what appears to be a final assault. Artillery bombardment heavier than any previous day. Then infantry from all directions, converging on the contracted perimeter. The defenders meet them. 600 exhausted, dehydrated, half-starved soldiers against thousands of Japanese infantry. The fighting is beyond anything experienced in previous days. The Japanese are not probing or infiltrating, they are attempting to overrun the position through sheer weight of numbers. Garrison Hill is assaulted by an entire battalion. The defenders, maybe 100 men, hold the summit through firepower and desperation. Machine guns fire until their barrels glow red. Riflemen shoot until they run out of ammunition, then pick up weapons from dead comrades and continue. Grenades are thrown until none remain. The Japanese reach the trenches. Bayonet fighting on the hilltop. A lance corporal kills 6 Japanese soldiers before being bayoneted himself. He survives, crawls to the aid station with a punctured lung. The tennis court becomes a slaughterhouse. Japanese soldiers charge across the open ground. British machine guns cut them down. The attack falters, regroups, comes again. The defenders fire until ammunition runs critically low, then fix bayonets prepared for the final stand. It does not come. At 2 p.m. the Japanese withdraw. Not a tactical retreat, a full withdrawal from immediate contact. They pull back into the jungle, leaving their dead on the field. The defenders do not understand why. They are too exhausted to care. They slump in their trenches, incapable of movement. Then, at 4 p.m., the sound reaches them. Artillery fire, but not Japanese mountain guns. British 25-pounders, heavy, sustained, coming from the west. The relief column has reached the outskirts of Kohima. The siege is not over. The Japanese still hold positions around the ridge. The fighting will continue for days, but the garrison is no longer alone. The road is no longer cut. The breaking point has held. April 15, 1944, 6 p.m. Elements of the 2nd British Division enter Kohima from the west. They do not find a garrison. They find survivors, men who have not slept in days, who have not eaten a proper meal in a week, who are so dehydrated their lips are cracked and bleeding, their eyes sunken, their movements slow and mechanical. The relieving troops stare at soldiers who look more like concentration camp inmates than British infantry. The perimeter they have been defending is unrecognizable as a military position. Trenches are shell craters connected by scrapes in the earth. Bunkers are piles of sandbags and timber, half collapsed, providing minimal cover. Bodies lie where they fell. British, Indian, Japanese, impossible to retrieve during the siege, now decomposing in the heat. The tennis court is a moonscape, cratered, scorched, littered with equipment, ammunition cases, and corpses. The neat white lines that once marked the boundaries of a colonial game are obliterated beneath the debris of industrial warfare. But the position has held. The Japanese have not taken Garrison Hill. They have not cut the road. The strategic objective, denying the enemy access to the Imphal road, has been achieved, at catastrophic cost. Final casualty count for the siege, 493 killed or missing, over 600 wounded. Out of 1,500 defenders, fewer than 400 remained combat effective, a 73% casualty rate. In military terms, the garrison has been destroyed as a fighting unit, but it held for 16 days. Long enough, the arrival of the 2nd Division transforms the tactical situation. The garrison was outnumbered 10-1. Now British forces approaching Kohima number over 10,000. Artillery, armor support, air support, resources the garrison never had. The siege becomes a battle. The desperate defense becomes a counter-offensive, but the Japanese do not collapse. General Sato's 31st Division is in its own crisis. Supplies have not arrived. The promised resupply convoys, struggling through 300 miles of mountain jungle, have failed to reach the division. Rations are exhausted. Ammunition is critically low. Medical supplies are non-existent. Soldiers are eating grass, tree bark, anything to stave off starvation. Sato sends increasingly desperate messages to 15th Army headquarters. His division is starving. Casualties are mounting. Without resupply, continued offensive operations are impossible. He requests permission to withdraw. Mutaguchi, commanding the overall operation, refuses. The offensive depends on taking Kohima. Sato must continue attacking. Supplies will arrive. The breakthrough is imminent. The supplies do not arrive. The breakthrough does not come. Sato's division begins disintegrating, not from enemy action, but from starvation and disease. Soldiers too weak to fight. Officers unable to organize coherent assaults. The vaunted Japanese infantry, veterans who marched 300 miles through mountains to reach Kohima, are dying from malnutrition and exhaustion. But they do not withdraw. Japanese military culture does not permit retreat without orders. Even as the division starves, even as British reinforcements arrive in overwhelming numbers, the Japanese continue holding their positions around Kohima. The battle transitions from siege to grinding attrition. British forces attack Japanese positions on the hills surrounding the ridge. The Japanese, dug into bunkers and caves, defend with the desperation of men who know they are trapped. No supplies, no reinforcement, no prospect of victory. Just orders to hold and training that makes disobeying orders unthinkable. April 18th. British tanks arrive. The first armor at Kohima. Lee and Grant tanks, American supplied, climbing the mountain road to support the infantry. Japanese anti-tank weapons are minimal, mostly magnetic mines wielded by suicide attackers who rush the tanks. The tanks break Japanese defensive positions that had held for days. Bunkers that resisted infantry assault crumble under 75mm shells fired at point-blank range. Machine gun nests are crushed under tank treads. The Japanese have no answer for armor in this terrain. April 20th, the tennis court is finally secured. British infantry, supported by tanks and artillery, assault across the cratered ground. The Japanese defenders, entrenched on the eastern side for 16 days, are overwhelmed. Those who do not die fighting withdraw into the jungle. The symbolic importance is immediate. The tennis court, which defined the front line for 2 weeks, is in British hands. The perimeter expands. The stranglehold loosens, but the battle for Kohima continues. The Japanese hold Naga village to the east, a maze of huts and terraces carved into the hillside. They hold positions on ridges overlooking the road. Every position must be taken by assault. Every bunker must be destroyed individually. The fighting drags through May, day after day of attacks and counterattacks, of bunkers cleared and positions secured, of incremental advances measured in yards. The Japanese do not break. They defend every position to annihilation, then withdraw to the next prepared position and defend that. General Sato, watching his division starve and die, finally disobeys orders. On May 31st, without authorization from 15th Army headquarters, he orders the withdrawal of the 31st Division from Kohima. The retreat is conducted in good order, a fighting withdrawal, not a rout, but it is still a retreat. Mutaguchi relieves Sato of command. The gesture is meaningless. The 31st Division withdraws eastward, toward Burma, harassed by British forces but no longer capable of offensive operations. The siege and Battle of Kohima ends not with a decisive final assault, but with the Japanese melting back into the jungle, from which they emerged 3 months earlier. The cost is staggering on both sides. British and Indian forces, 4,000 casualties. Japanese 31st Division, over 8,000 dead, the majority from starvation and disease rather than combat. The division ceases to exist as an effective fighting force. But the strategic consequences dwarf the tactical casualties. Operation U-Go, Japan's offensive into India, has failed completely. The attack on Imphal, dependent on capturing Kohima to cut supply lines, collapses when Kohima holds. Japanese forces at Imphal, starving and exhausted, begin withdrawing in July. The retreat becomes a rout. Thousands of Japanese soldiers die during the withdrawal, killed by British pursuit forces, by disease, by starvation. The 15th Army loses over 50,000 men in Operation U-Go. It is the worst defeat in Japanese military history to that point. Entire divisions are destroyed. The offensive capability of Japanese forces in Burma is shattered, and the British, having stopped the Japanese offensive, transition to their own offensive. The road to Burma is open. The campaign to reconquer Southeast Asia begins at Kohima. The siege becomes a turning point, not just in the Burma Campaign, but in the Pacific War. Japan's last offensive capability in Southeast Asia is broken. The British and Indian forces, having proven they can defeat Japanese infantry in jungle warfare, advance with growing confidence. Burma will be liberated by May 1945. The road to Singapore and Malaya will reopen, all because 1,500 men held a ridge for 16 days. There are no grand ceremonies. Immediately after the battle, the survivors of the original garrison are evacuated, most too damaged physically and psychologically to return to combat. Some recover, some do not. The psychological wounds of Kohima, the claustrophobic terror of fighting an enemy meters away, the dehydration and exhaustion and constant bombardment, leave scars that never fully heal. But they held. Against impossible odds, with inadequate supplies, outnumbered 10-1, they held long enough for relief to arrive. They traded their lives and sanity for 16 days. Those 16 days changed the war, the Commonwealth War. Graves Commission maintains a cemetery at Kohima. Row after row of headstones marking British, Indian, Nepalese soldiers who died on that ridge. The epitaph, designed by John Maxwell Edmonds, reads, "When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow. We gave our today." The words are carved in stone overlooking the tennis court where men fought across 40 yards of cratered ground. The ridge is peaceful now, quiet. The jungle has reclaimed much of the battlefield. The trenches have eroded. The bunkers have collapsed, but the ridge remains. And the memory of what happened there remains. 1,500 soldiers stopped an army. Not through brilliance or superior firepower or tactical genius. Through simple, grinding refusal to break. Through endurance when endurance seemed impossible. Through holding when every rational calculation said holding was futile, they held. The road stayed open. Imphal survived. India was not invaded. The tide turned. At Kohima, the war changed. Not in a single dramatic moment, but through 16 days of accumulated survival. Through 1,000 small decisions to keep fighting when fighting seemed pointless. Through men who died in trenches defending ground they knew they would never leave. The siege of Kohima is not remembered as widely as some Pacific War battles. But it should be, because it represents something fundamental about warfare and human endurance, that sometimes the greatest victory is simply refusing to lose, that sometimes survival itself is triumph.